بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وأجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ustad Abu Ayyub here for another episode of Our History. Now today we're going to be learning about this great sultan who is remembered in the history books as being the Magnificent. On September 30th, 1520, a young Shahzadeh, a young prince comes to power. He's tall, he's lanky, and he has a thin line of hair over his upper lip. For the Europeans, when they see this weak leader come to power, they are gleeing with excitement, hoping that this sultan, unlike his father, who was a Ghazi sultan, a true warrior sultan, that this sultan would be other than that, would be completely different. And as a matter of fact, they joyfully say, the lion has gone and has been replaced by a lamb. And yet this young sultan, despite how he looks, despite, their initial perceptions of his weakness, turns out to be one of the greatest sultans and military geniuses of his age. This is the rise of Kanuni Sultan Suleiman. Now, Kanuni Sultan Suleiman, he was born in the city of Trabzon. Trabzon at this time was the place in which his father, Yavuz Sultan Selim, the great sultan who brings the caliphate into the arms and into the lap of the Ottomans, was the governor at the time of the reign of his own father, Sultan Bayezid II. Now, Kanuni Sultan Suleiman, growing up in Trabzon, which is in northeastern Turkey, at first, takes in the climate of that region. That area is known for its beauty. It's known now today as the center of the hazelnut crops, of the tea growing region. And Sultan Suleiman, like this beautiful climate, he grows up sheltered and nurtured. Very quickly, however, his father, Yavuz Sultan Selim, recognizes that his son needs tarbiyah, needs the correct guidance and education. And so he elects one of the great scholars of that era. His name is Markaz Effendi. And Sheikh Markaz Effendi comes to Trabzon in order to teach this young sultan and guide him in the proper education so he grows up to indeed become a just sultan and a righteous sultan who is fearful of Allah Azza wa Jal and who will recognize that everything that comes to pass is simply through the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. Eventually, as we know from our previous episodes, Yavuz Sultan Selim, on the eve of planning a major campaign against the European powers, Yavuz Sultan Selim suddenly dies, leaving the Ottoman throne empty, but empty for his only son, Shahzadeh Suleiman. Having been taught by Sheikh Markaz Effendi, Sultan Suleiman is not only prepared both in terms of Islamic knowledge as well as spiritually trained, but he is now prepared to become not only the Sultan, but also inheriting from his father the caliphate and leadership of all Muslims. Sultan Suleiman as well inherits the mightiest army that Europe and Asia combined has seen in centuries. The army that is left by Yavuz Sultan Selim to his son is poised for advancements against the European powers that had for centuries sent wave after wave after wave of crusaders upon the Muslim lands. And in order to show his strength and prove against his detractors, Sultan Suleiman launches an attack against the Hungarians as well as other European powers, smashing the Hungarians and capturing the city of Belgrade. Following this victory, Sultan Suleiman then uses the Ottoman navy to capture the island of Rhodes from the crusaders who had been situated there since around the 11th century. Europe is sent into shock. Even the great ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, King Charles II, who claimed to be the emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor, even he is hesitant to face the might of the Ottomans and press and even test this young sultan. Sultan Suleiman is so successful that in the year 1526, he achieves one of the greatest Ottoman victories in history. This is the victory at the Battle of Mohacs. And Mohacs, here he faces a combined force of the Hungarian nobles and their young king who wanted to oust the Ottomans from their lands. And the young sultan, who brings with him not only his military might of the Ottomans, but also the famed Janissaries along with their cannons, faces the onslaught of these heavily armored Hungarian knights. During the Battle of Mohacs, they consider it one of the shortest battles in history. The Ottomans stand firm. They stand their ground against continuous attacks and charges by the Hungarian cavalry. Each time the Hungarian cavalry would charge, the Ottomans would shoot at them with their firearms and with their early matchlock rifles, holding the line. And each time that the cavalry would charge, they would also devastate their ranks with their cannon and with their artillery until the Hungarians break. And once they break, they flee over the battlefield, getting trapped in the swampy, muddy landscape that makes up that area of the river Danube. And the young Hungarian ruler, nothing is heard from him again. He drowns somewhere in the swamps and his body is never found. Following the Battle of Mohacs, Sultan Suleiman, who realizes that it will be difficult to control all of Hungary, decides to place a friendly ruler on its throne. Now, for the time being, this would work. However, Charles, the emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor, he himself laid claim to the Hungarian throne and kept on inciting the people of Hungary against the Turks. Now, with this happening, Kanuni Sultan Suleiman, who offers security and safety to the many, many different peoples that live in Hungary, is seen as a protector for many of those who face persecution from the Catholics. Among these are minority Christian groups, various Protestants and Lutherans who find safety and security in Ottoman lands, and not to mention the sizable Jewish community of those lands as well. But with the insistence that he has the right to rule over Hungary, the Emperor Charles decides to at least raise his armies against the Ottomans. And in reaction to this, Sultan Suleiman then launches a new campaign around the year 1529. This campaign seizes not only Budapest from the hands of the Hungarians and the Austrians, but it also threatens Vienna, the very capital of the Holy Roman Empire. Vienna is surrounded by Sultan Suleiman's troops. And although this may not have been the initial target of the campaign, it leaves an incredible mark in the psyche of the Europeans, who from that moment onwards would forever fear the terrible Turk. Far from being terrible, however, Sultan Suleiman rules with justice. He rules with honor. He rules with the Quran. And for this reason, he is remembered as the Lawgiver, Kanuni Sultan Suleiman. One of the first things that he does is he tries to make sure that the Sharia would be aligned with the laws of the Ottomans. Now, the laws of the Ottomans previously had been made with the Quran as its main basis. However, there were also tribal laws, Turkish tribal laws that had entered into the laws of the Ottomans. And because of this, Kanuni Sultan Suleiman and his teachers, such as the eminent Sheikh al-Islam, Abu Saud Effendi, such as the likes of his own teacher, Marcus Effendi, and the very close milk brother of the Sultan, Sheikh Yahya Effendi, the three of them encouraged the Sultan to align the laws of the Ottomans as closely as possible to the Quran. And so the Sultan spends endless nights making sure that the laws are in exact accordance to the Quranic inscriptions. So the Sultan would spend countless nights making sure that the Ottoman laws were according to the prescription of the Quran. As Ottoman influence increases and spreads throughout the lands, we see that Sultan Suleiman also gains a number of allies. Amongst the most surprising of these allies is none other than the King of France, Francis I, who sees Kanuni Sultan Suleiman as a valuable ally against the spread of the Holy Roman Empire. And so we find in this time the French working very, very closely together with the Ottomans. And this alliance lasts for many decades, including which there were a number of times where joint fleets, French ships together with Ottoman ships, would attack, for example, the coast of Italy or the coast of southern France and the coast of Spain to attack Habsburg ports and Habsburg cities. At the same time, in North Africa, which at this period of time was under the control and the leadership of one very, very skilled captain whose name is Khayr-ad-Din Barbarossa. Barbarossa sees in Kanuni Sultan Suleiman a ruler and a leader who exemplifies the Sharia. So what does he do? He takes his land, Algeria, as well as Tunis, and he offers this to the Ottomans. And for the first time, these parts of North Africa come under Ottoman rule. And in exchange for this, in recognition of his bravery, in recognition for his expertise as a captain, a naval captain, Sultan Suleiman makes Khayr-ad-Din Barbarossa the admiral of the Ottoman fleets. With victories in the west, Sultan Suleiman slowly concentrated on the east, where the rise of the Safavids had been a thorn in the side of the Ottomans since the time of his own father, Yavuz Sultan Selim. With the western borders now stable, Kanuni Sultan Suleiman now led his armies eastward into Azerbaijan as well as the great capital of Tabriz in Persia. He then moves his army southwards and liberates the city of Baghdad from the reign and the rule of the Safavids, who had left nothing but devastation in that city, killing much of its Sunni population. Now, as things slowly stabilized, the Sultan, who had now been on campaign for years and years, was looking for some stability in his lands. The Sultan retires from leading military campaigns and decides now to concentrate on the administration of the state. Here, his expertise in governance and leadership produces some of the finest officials in Ottoman history. The likes of Rustam Pasha, the wazir and also the son-in-law of the Sultan, and the likes of the formidable Serbian wazir Sokolu Mehmed Pasha. At the same time, Sultan Suleiman is concentrating on the building of Constantinople or the building of Islambul as the great capital of the Muslim lands. We see new masajid rising throughout the landscape, as well as libraries, madrasas, colleges, bathhouses, and more. It's during this time that we also see this famed architect, Mimar Sinan, come to the fore, who would leave his mark in the era and the time of Kanuni Sultan Suleiman, an era of magnificence, an era of great power and great might, and an era that all Muslims, when they come to Istanbul today, see firsthand with the sites such as the Rustam Pasha Mosque, the likes of the madrasas that are available here, and of course, the Grand Suleymaniya, which dominates the skyline of the city to this very day. In our next episode, we're going to take a look more deeply at the administration of Kanuni Sultan Suleiman, as well as the architecture, the arts that thrived during his era, and why he was known in the West as Suleiman the Magnificent. Join us for another episode of Our History on Path to Success. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.